Hi guys, this video is going to be a little different. As you guys know, I recently sat for the PaSPaces exam and thankfully I passed. Thank the lucky stars. You have no idea how stressed I was about this exam. I don't know why, but practical exams like PaSPaces and OSCEs always make me feel so nervous. Anyway, I thought I'll share with you my experience and some tips on how to pass the MRCP. The first tip is don't tell anyone you're sitting for the exam. Trust me, it takes a lot of pressure away. My driving instructor gave me this tip and it was so useful. He told me not to tell anyone I was sitting for my driving test, and that definitely made me feel a lot calmer and less anxious doing my driving test. And when I didn't pass, I didn't feel like I disappointed anyone, if you know what I mean. A little secret, it took me 3 attempts to pass my driving test. Anyway, I didn't tell anyone I was sitting for my part 1 and part 2. I think the only people who knew were my parents, my sister and my boyfriend. And I definitely felt much more calmer doing the exam. The only awkward thing is when you see your mates or colleagues in the exam center, but it was all fine in the end. The next tip is about when to sit for the MRCP. If you can, try and sit for it as early as possible. That way, all your medical school knowledge will still be fresh in your mind. This is especially true for the part 1 because there is a lot of anatomy and physiology in the part 1. The part 2 is more clinical, so maybe sit for that once you have at least 1 to 2 years of clinical experience. I did the part 1 and part 2 back to back. I had only 2 months to revise for the part 2, but doing it so close together really helped me. I didn't have to revise everything all over again. I could just build on what I had already revised for the part 1. The next tip is about the materials I used for the exam. So for the part 1 and 2, I didn't use any books or revision notes. All I used was the PasTest question bank. They have more than 2,000 questions and I did the question bank twice. There are so many question banks available online for the MRCP. PasTest was recommended to me by my predecessors, so that's why I went with that. I think I tried OnExamination as well. Comparing those two, the questions on PasTest is definitely harder, but the explanations are not very detailed. In OnExamination, the questions are a lot easier, but they have very good and very detailed explanations for most of their questions. No matter what question bank you go with, remember to do the past year papers. You can find the past year papers on this website. I think it is called ReviseMRCP. I'll leave a link to it down below. It is completely free. The only caveat is that you'll need to complete the whole paper, 150 questions, before you're able to check your answers. You can't save your answers like you can on the other question banks. So maybe do the papers when you have at least 1 to 2 hours free. For PaSPaces, reading material-wise, I only used one book, the Pocketbook for PaSPaces by Dr. Rupa Bessant. I read it cover to cover at least twice before the exam. The next tip is for PaSPaces. Try and attend a PaSPaces course before the exam. I don't know anyone who passed their PaSPaces without going for a course. There are so many good ones out there. They are all around the same price, around £1,400 for a 4-day course. I went for 3 courses. I'll tell you why in a minute. I went for the PassPaces by Dr. Rupa Bessant, the Ealing PaSPaces course, and the Ealing Neurology and Ophthalmology course. You only need to attend at least one course, and between PassPaces and Ealing, definitely go for the PassPaces one. The quality and teaching standard is definitely much higher in PassPaces, and you'll get to see more patients on the PassPaces course. So the reason I went for 3 courses is because I don't work in a large regional or in a teaching hospital. I'm currently working in a district general hospital, so my exposure to cases that you'll get in PaSPaces is very limited. The hospital I am working in now doesn't have a renal unit. It doesn't have a dedicated neurology ward, and it is not a transplant center. So if you're in a similar position and feel that you have a very limited exposure to patients, try and attend more courses. It will give you the exposure that you need to pass the exam. I know that the courses can be expensive, but remember you get to use your study budget. If you are doing CMT like me, you get £800 a year, so that will cover at least half of the cost. The last tip is also about PACES. Once you know your exam centre, try and read about what the hospital specialises in and what the patient population there is like. For example, if the hospital has a large ophthalmology unit, you'll definitely have more chances of having an ophthalmology case for Station 5 and for the neurology station. If the hospital is a regional unit for cystic fibrosis, you are more likely to get a cystic fibrosis patient in the respiratory station. If the exam is in a DGH like mine was, you're more likely to get COPD or pulmonary fibrosis in the respiratory station. Before I end this video, I want to share with you what I got for my PACES exam. After the exam, I did make a note of all the cases I had, so I'll go through them in order of how I did the exam. My first station was cardio, a gentleman with a midline sternotomy scar, no venous harvesting scars. He had obvious peripheral bruising. On auscultation, there was a flow murmur, a mechanical click consistent with the second heart sound. My diagnosis was aortic valve replacement with no signs of decompensation or peripheral stigmata of endocarditis. My second station was neurology. I had a 56-year-old gentleman with right arm weakness. It was Erb's palsy, most likely from trauma to the brachial plexus. The viva was mostly on the differences between an upper and lower brachial plexus lesion. My third station was the communication station. It was informing a dad that his 27-year-old son has met with an accident, suffered multiple injuries, and is now on a ventilator and is brain dead. In the station, apart from explaining the situation to the dad, you'll need to discuss with the dad about organ donation. My next station was Station 5. My first case was a gentleman with a tremor and deranged LFTs. My second case was a 65-year-old lady with pain and tenderness on the sole of her right feet. She had no history of diabetes or any other past medical conditions. My differentials for this case was plantar fasciitis, stress fracture or metatarsalgia. My next station was history taking. The case I had was an 84-year-old gentleman with headache and polymyalgia. The viva was mostly on the differential diagnosis of a headache and the red flags for headaches. My next station was the respiratory station. I had a 67-year-old gentleman on ambulatory oxygen. On auscultation, he had find and inspiratory crackles. The viva was mostly on the investigations and treatment for idiopathic pulmonary fibrosis. My last station was the abdominal station. I had a renal case for this one. She had a non-working brachiocephalic fistula on the right arm, a Rutherford-Morrison scar on the right iliac fossa with a palpable mass underneath, which suggests a renal transplant. She had no features of uremia or fluid overload, so the current mode of renal replacement therapy is via the renal transplant. She had obvious bruises on her fingertips and an ulcer on her left leg, so the most likely reason for renal failure is diabetic nephropathy. That is all the cases I had in the exam. I hope you find these tips useful. If you have any questions about the exams or about PACES, please let me know in the comments down below. Please give this video a thumbs up if you liked it, and I will see you in my next video. Bye!